So this process he comes up with, you start using your imagination. Didn't we just use our imagination? What would your God do for you? Wow. It's a bounce back. It's a bounce back. It's like saying, I don't want to think of that. I mean, in this room right now, because that leads me, I'd have to think some more. I'd have to start imagining what stops him from doing that. I won't even imagine that. I won't even think that. That's because religion has trained you to believe that you're better than God. And if you start thinking like that, you have to put down and tear down this thing in your head that says you're better than God. You have to start thinking, my God is good. You have to stop being an ingrate and start truly being grateful. That we serve a God that will do we serve a God that has done everything for us. And all he wants us to do is utilize that he's done for us. Utilize that he's given to us. And this starts off so that when you start to imagine those things that, man, how could I live in this world? Where could I go? What could I say? How wealthy could I be? How long can I live? How healthy can I live that long life? And you start to imagine, well, if I'm going to live a long life, what am I going to do? I'm going to live to be 120? Am I going to live in health? If I'm in health, what am I doing those 120 years? You know what I like? God, like I said, this is such a process that at the same time it's not hard, it's not easily understood. But it's so plainly seen. He didn't hide this from us. He told us, I didn't do things in the corner in the dark. So if it's obscure to you, if you can't see it, it's not because I didn't give you the ability to see it. You really don't want to see it. Not everyone loves the light. And he allows us. If you love darkness, you know what he said he'll do? He'll give you darkness. As much of it as you want. He said he'll give you gross darkness. If you love the upside down way, you know what he'll do? Turn the way upside down for you. That's love. You want to live eternity in hell, you know what he'll do? Let you live eternity in hell. Why? To punish you? Because he loves you. That's what you wanted. That's what you get. So when you start utilizing this process and you say, oh, I want to see this. Not everyone will do that. I wish everyone would do that. Just get a hunger I want to know the truth. I want to know how this works. And let me decide whether or not I'm going to do this, whether or not I'm going to utilize this. I'll use my imagination. I'll think up some things that are so big, it'll make God make smoke start pouring out of heaven. And then you start to get a hope that maybe this is real. I just need to hear a little bit more. I need to learn a little bit more. I need to put a little bit more together. And the more you hear, the more you imagine, the more hope you get that it's real. And before you know it, you're starting to have faith for, well, I was hoping and dreaming of 10 mansions. But, you know, the more I heard and the more learned and the more I understood, I just wanted 2 mansions. I didn't want 10. I think he can do that. My hope is in the fact that he could give me. He that spared not his own son for me, how shall he not with him freely give me all things? So whether life or death or things present or things to come, the universe, he said the present, the future, he said it's all mine. What if I could just get enough to get my child that house? Start having a little faith for that. And how much faith does it take? Just a little. That's how much he loves us. You don't have to go out and try to. You say, if you have faith that's the size of a grain of mustard seed, you can get just a little bit of faith in me. He said, then you can move the mountains. But we've got to stop serving a small God. Because once you have the faith for it, what's the next thing you should do? Huh? You have faith and believe, but what's the very next thing you do? Give thanks. You're grateful. When did you receive it? When you prayed. You can move on to the next thing. And see, this is what he wants us to live life. And where our process comes from is Romans chapter 1, verse 16 through 21. He said, this is what he wants for you to have, is faith that engenders more faith. Faith that leads to faith. Just get faith for a little thing. You get that little thing and you start giving thanks and you're already off to, well, wow, I dreamed up one mansion. That other one's got to be right around the corner. In fact, I might go back to the 10. We just drove this weekend through a 17-mile drive up there. Carmel, we like to drive through there. See how God's children should live. Did you hear what I said? See how God's children should live. It's a dream builder. Then you go through there, you get real picky after you've been in there for a while. See this mansion that looks like 3 hotels. I wouldn't put that kind of stuff around the windows. I wouldn't want that one. I wouldn't want that one. No. The fence isn't right. Why? All of a sudden you started dreaming. But then when you drive out of there, it's sort of like leaving church.
Yeah.
17-mile drive is still back up there. And the homes are still up there. And when you leave here, all of the good things that you're dreaming of, they're still here. Instead of you taking them out the door by the seaside. And great multitudes, you see the S on that? Were gathered together unto him, so that he went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. Now, we've been studying this for a while, and we're right now concentrating on hearing, isn't that right? Those that have been studying right along? This has to do with that part of the process, hearing. It's not that you haven't heard, but you need to hear it. You need to hear it till you understand it. And if you don't understand it, you need to do what the disciples did and the other people that didn't understand it. Ask the question, Jesus, what are you talking about? We have more people in church right now that need to ask that question. What are you talking about? The parable of the sower, everyone in here, I believe, knows the parable of the sower. Heard it and heard it and heard it and heard it. But what is he talking about? What's the bottom line to the parable of the sower? When he gets to the bottom, and he explained that in his explanation, what was the last part of that? The last part of the parable of the sower. Anyone remember? No, that was before. He said, he that has an ear to hear. That was before. That was in verse 9. 100-fold, 20-fold, 60-fold, of what? I didn't read that in mine. Look at it again. In the last, let me make it easier. The last verse where he's explaining the parable of the sword, right? And that's the end of the explanation. What is he talking about? He's talking about farming. He's talking... See why we need to ask the question? We're looking at it. What was he talking about throughout the explanation? They asked him, Jesus, what are you talking about? So he explained it. And we've all heard the explanation, haven't we? He's talking about the first thing God ever said to man. Be fruitful. You guys, come on, you guys. Didn't he say these are those that were sown on stony ground? Who brought forth what? No fruit. It's a parable about bringing forth fruit. Isn't it? What did God say in the beginning? Genesis 1:26, I believe it is. Be fruitful and multiply. So let's go back up to the first part of this. Well, we won't go through all of it, but when he got to verse 9, he says, who has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, everyone there, except for the deaf, heard what he was talking about. So he wasn't talking about deaf people. How many people do you think were there that had ears to hear? Everyone except the ones that were deaf. No, that's not who he's talking to. The ones that wanted to understand. He hadn't explained it. And he says the same thing. It's interesting in all three Gospels. It's real easy to remember because he says it in verse 9 in Matthew. He says it in verse 9 in Mark. And then he says it in verse 8 in Luke. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. But in Luke, he said it a little different. That's why it's nice to compare the Gospels when you're studying. See, here he said it. We just read that, right? And if you go over to Mark, he said it again. But you know what happened in Luke? This is what happened, which Luke recalled. He that has ears to hear, let him hear. It's a little different than just saying, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Isn't there a difference? Yeah, because emphasis was placed on the fact you need to hear this. If you got ears to hear, you need to hear this. He's talking about being fruitful. And he said, this is a mystery. Look in verse 13.